In the cavernous training hall of Fort Belvoir, the early morning light slanted through the high windows, casting long, pale beams across the rows of assembled cadets. The air was thick with the low murmur of restless whispers and the faint scrape of boots against the polished concrete floor. A group of young men and women, clad in crisp uniforms that bore the sharp insignia of their academy, stood in loose formation. Their faces were a mixture of fatigue and defiance, eyes darting sideways as they exchanged quiet comments that barely concealed their mounting skepticism. At the far end of the hall, near the raised dais where the daily briefings were held, Lieutenant Harper stepped forward. Her olive-drab uniform was immaculate, her posture rigid yet unyielding. There was an undeniable intensity in her sharp gaze, a presence that demanded attention even before she spoke. Yet, as her voice cut through the murmurs with a clear, steady tone, the response was not the respectful silence she expected. Instead, a ripple of smirks and exchanged glances passed through the ranks. Some cadets shifted restlessly, others whispered just loud enough for their neighbors to hear, their expressions betraying a blend of amusement and defiance. Lieutenant Harper's hands, clasped behind her back, remained steady as she began issuing the day's orders. The commands were crisp and direct, outlining the sequence of drills and the expected conduct during the exercises. But the cadets responded with a collective disregard that was palpable. When she called for a formation drill, several hesitated, some openly ignoring the instruction. Small clusters formed, their whispers growing bolder, and a few exchanged outright smirks that seemed to mock her authority. The hall, meant to be a place of discipline and order, felt fractured with undercurrents of rebellion. Despite the overt disrespect, Lieutenant Harper did not falter. Her voice remained calm, her tone unwavering as she reiterated the commands. The silence that should have followed was replaced by a low hum of discontent. Yet, beneath her composed exterior, there was a flicker of something sharper, a knowing patience that suggested she had weathered worse storms. A few instructors standing at the periphery of the hall observed her with quiet interest. They noticed the subtle tightening of her jaw, the way her eyes scanned the room, assessing not just the cadets' defiance but the underlying cause of their unrest. One of the instructors, Captain Reynolds, exchanged a glance with Sergeant Barnes, both veterans of countless training cycles. "She's got the nerve," Reynolds murmured, his voice low enough to avoid reaching the cadets. "But these kids aren't used to taking orders from someone they don't respect. And right now, she hasn't earned it in their eyes." Sergeant Barnes nodded, his brow furrowed. "There's more here than meets the eye. She's holding her ground, but it's clear the cadets are testing her. It's a delicate game, one wrong move, and it could blow up in her face." Lieutenant Harper's gaze flickered toward the instructors briefly before turning back to the cadets. There was an undercurrent of steel beneath her calm that suggested she was not merely enduring the disrespect but preparing for a crucial moment. As she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of quiet authority, a promise of resolve that was not yet fully grasped by those before her. "Listen carefully," she began, her eyes locking onto a group of cadets who had been particularly audacious in their defiance. "This training is not a game. The discipline you show here will be the difference between life and death in the field. If you're not prepared to respect the chain of command, then you're unfit to wear this uniform." The murmuring ceased for a heartbeat, but the defiance in the cadets' eyes did not waver. Instead, a few exchanged barely concealed smirks, as if daring her to prove her point. Lieutenant Harper's expression tightened, but she remained composed, allowing the silence to stretch just long enough to unsettle the room. Among the cadets was a young woman named Jensen, whose skeptical gaze was fixed intently on Lieutenant Harper. Jensen had been one of the most vocal in questioning the new officer's authority, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp. She whispered something to her companion, who chuckled softly, their confidence seemingly unshaken. Lieutenant Harper's voice softened, not in submission but with a calm that suggested she was speaking beyond the immediate moment. "I understand your doubts. I've been where you are. But respect is earned, not demanded. Watch closely, and you'll see why." The hall remained tense, the atmosphere charged with anticipation mingled with rebellion. Lieutenant Harper's presence was a quiet storm, a poised force that had yet to fully reveal itself. The instructors at the edges of the room exchanged glances once more, sensing that this was the moment before the tide shifted. As the briefing concluded and the cadets began to disperse, the whispers resumed, but now with a new edge, a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Lieutenant Harper remained on the dais, her eyes scanning the room with a steady focus. The day's training was about to begin, and though the cadets had not yet accepted her authority, something had changed. Captain Reynolds approached quietly, offering a nod of acknowledgement. "You held the line," he said softly. "Not many could have stood firm like that." Lieutenant Harper nodded slightly, her gaze unwavering. "This is only the beginning," she replied. "They'll learn. They have to." As the cadets moved toward the training grounds, Lieutenant Harper's figure remained silhouetted against the fading light, a symbol of quiet resilience amidst the undercurrents of defiance. The challenge was clear, but so was her determination, to command not through fear or rank alone, but through the strength of her presence and the unyielding resolve that lay beneath the surface. The morning sun climbed higher, flooding the training grounds with harsh light that reflected off the metal helmets and polished boots of the cadets. Lieutenant Harper stood at the center, clipboard in hand, her eyes sharp and unyielding as the group assembled for the critical exercise scheduled for the day. The once subtle undercurrent of defiance had grown more overt, the cadets' whispers now carried an edge of open challenge, and their movements betrayed a collective reluctance to submit to her authority. "Fall in," Harper commanded, her voice cutting through the murmur like a blade. But the response was fragmented. A cluster of cadets lingered at the rear, trading glances and barely concealing their smirks. A few stepped forward hesitantly, but many remained rooted, their body language signaling defiance rather than discipline. Sergeant Barnes, overseeing the training alongside Captain Reynolds, moved among the ranks, his face a mask of concern. "Cadets," he called out, "you will execute the squad movement drill as ordered. This is not optional." Yet the cadets' reaction was a mixture of scoffs and whispered jokes, their confidence in their collective resistance emboldened by the absence of immediate repercussions. Lieutenant Harper's gaze swept the assembly, noting the growing boldness. A group near the front, led by Jensen, exchanged a barely suppressed laugh as Harper's eyes locked with theirs. The tension in the air was palpable. Harper's calm began to show signs of strain, though her voice remained steady. "This exercise is designed to prepare you for coordination under pressure. Disobedience compromises not just your safety but that of your entire unit. Begin the drill." The cadets hesitated, their reluctance palpable. Several exchanged looks, silently weighing their options, before some eventually began the movements with a half-hearted effort. Others remained still, their resistance unbroken. The training ground, meant to be a place of order and discipline, was fracturing under the weight of their insubordination. Captain Reynolds stepped forward, his tone sharp and authoritative. "Cadets, this isn't a game. You will follow orders or face consequences." His words hung in the air, but the effect was limited. The cadets' expressions hardened, their defiance now tinged with open disrespect. Lieutenant Harper clenched her jaw, her mind racing to find a way to regain control. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, and the consequences of further disorder could be severe. Yet she remained composed, knowing that yielding now would only reinforce their insolence. Sergeant Barnes approached quietly. "They're pushing back hard," he murmured. "You need to make them see the cost of this behavior before it spirals." Harper nodded, eyes narrowing. "I'm holding steady. I'll wait for the right moment." As the drill faltered, a sudden commotion broke out at the edge of the formation. Jensen stepped forward, her voice loud enough to carry. "Why should we listen? You're new here. We don't have to take orders from someone who hasn't earned our respect." Her words rippled through the cadets like a spark to dry brush. Whispers turned into murmurs of agreement, and some voices joined in, questioning Harper's authority with increasing boldness. The fragile structure of discipline began to crumble. Harper's gaze locked onto Jensen, her voice cool but firm. "Respect is earned through action, not by challenging authority without cause. If you doubt me, watch closely and judge for yourself." The challenge hung in the air, unanswered but felt by all. The cadets' confidence swelled, fueled by their perception of Harper's isolation. Meanwhile, Captain Reynolds exchanged a sharp look with Sergeant Barnes. "This isn't just disobedience," Reynolds said quietly. "It's a test of leadership. She has to prove she's more than just an officer in uniform." The tension escalated as the training officer on duty struggled to maintain control. Orders became commands, commands became demands, but the cadets' resistance only intensified. Some refused to move, others performed drills with deliberate sloppiness, their collective defiance a silent rebellion against the chain of command. Harper's composure was tested, but she remained a pillar of steadiness amidst the growing chaos. Her eyes scanned the crowd, calculating, waiting for the moment when she could turn the tide. As the sun climbed higher, the exercise approached a critical juncture. The cadets, emboldened by their defiance, prepared to reject Harper's authority outright. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, the unspoken question hanging: would Harper break, or would she find the strength to command respect? She stood firm, signaling to the instructors that she was ready. "We proceed," she said simply, her voice carrying an unyielding certainty. "Not because you obey blindly, but because I will show you why discipline matters." The cadets hesitated, the air charged with tension. The challenge had been laid bare, and the battle for authority was far from over. The sharp clang of the training hall's massive iron door echoed through the tense air, slicing through the murmur of insubordination like a bolt of lightning. Every cadet's head snapped toward the entrance as the figure of the general strode purposefully inside, his presence commanding immediate silence. The room, charged with defiance moments before, fell into a stunned hush, the weight of his authority pressing down like a physical force. General Matthews moved with a deliberate grace, his uniform immaculate, his medals gleaming in the harsh light. His eyes swept over the assembled cadets, then settled on Lieutenant Harper standing resolute in the center of the formation. Without hesitation, the general approached her, stopping just a few paces away. The silence stretched taut as he raised his hand in a precise, formal salute. Lieutenant Harper returned the salute crisply, her posture unbroken, her expression steady but guarded. The cadets watched in disbelief, whispers of confusion rippling through the ranks. The general's gesture was not merely a formality, it was a public acknowledgement of Harper's authority, an unambiguous endorsement that shattered the fragile illusion of their defiance. The general's voice, when he spoke, was firm and clear, resonating through the hall. "Stand at ease, cadets," he commanded. "Lieutenant Harper is in command." The words hung in the air, heavy with significance. The cadets shifted uncomfortably, their smirks fading into uncertain expressions. The room, once fractured by disobedience, began to realign under the unmistakable gravity of the general's presence. Captain Reynolds, standing near the edges of the formation, allowed himself a rare, approving nod. "About time," he murmured under his breath. The general's gaze swept the room again, his eyes sharp and uncompromising. "Lieutenant Harper has earned her place here through service and sacrifice. Her leadership is not a matter of debate." The cadets' silence deepened, the weight of their earlier insolence pressing heavily against their consciences. Jensen, who had been the most vocal in challenging Harper's command, lowered her gaze, the defiance in her eyes dimmed but not extinguished. Harper stepped forward, her voice steady but carrying newfound authority. "This training is essential. Our purpose here is to prepare for situations where hesitation and disobedience can cost lives. I expect full cooperation." The general nodded approvingly. "Discipline is the backbone of any effective unit. You will follow orders and respect the chain of command. Failure to do so will not be tolerated." A murmur of acknowledgement rippled through the cadets, the tension easing but not disappearing. The lesson was clear: resistance was futile in the face of true authority. With a final glance at Lieutenant Harper, the general turned toward the exit. "Carry on, Lieutenant," he said. "Show them why you're worthy of their respect." As the heavy door closed behind him, the room seemed to exhale collectively. The cadets, now visibly subdued, moved as one, falling into formation with a precision that had been absent moments before. Orders were given and followed without hesitation, each movement executed with a renewed sense of purpose. Captain Reynolds approached Harper, a faint smile breaking his usually stern demeanor. "You've got their attention now. Don't let it slip." Harper nodded solemnly, her eyes scanning the formation. "This is just the beginning. They need to learn that respect is earned through action, not rank alone." The cadets carried out the exercises with a focus that was both new and tentative, their earlier arrogance replaced by a cautious respect. The transformation was not complete, but the foundation had been laid. Among the group, Jensen watched Harper closely, her skepticism tempered by a reluctant curiosity. The challenge remained, but the battlefield had shifted. Harper's authority was no longer just a title, it was a force recognized at the highest level. The training continued under the watchful eyes of the instructors, each command met with compliance. The atmosphere, though still charged, had moved toward order and discipline. Lieutenant Harper stood tall, the weight of the moment settling over her like armor. The general's intervention had turned the tide, but the real test was yet to come. She would have to prove not only that she commanded respect but that she deserved it in every action she took. As the sun climbed higher, casting a steady light over the grounds, the cadets marched forward under Harper's command, the echo of their boots a steady drumbeat of newfound discipline. The rebellion had been quelled, but the journey toward true leadership was only just beginning. The training hall, once charged with tension and defiance, now held an air of solemn attention as Lieutenant Harper addressed the cadets. The silence was punctuated only by the steady rhythm of boots on polished concrete as the group settled into formation. The gravity of the morning's events lingered, weaving through the ranks like an unspoken lesson in respect and discipline. Harper's voice was firm, carrying the weight of experience and conviction. "You need to understand why discipline is non-negotiable," she began, eyes sweeping over the cadets. "In combat zones, hesitation or insubordination can cost lives, not just yours, but those of your entire unit. This is not theory, it's reality." A murmur passed through the assembly, the cadets absorbing the gravity of her words. Somewhere near the front, Jensen shifted, her gaze flickering with a mix of skepticism and reflection. Captain Reynolds stepped forward, his presence reinforcing Harper's message. "Lieutenant Harper isn't just another officer here to bark orders," he said, his tone steady and serious. "She has served in multiple combat zones with distinction. Her leadership saved lives, more than once." The revelation settled over the cadets like a heavy cloak. The room, once filled with quiet rebellion, now bristled with a cautious respect. The weight of Harper's record, previously unknown, reframed the dynamic entirely. Harper continued, her voice unyielding. "Respect and discipline are earned through character and competence. Rank alone does not grant you authority. It's your actions, your dedication, your willingness to do what's necessary that defines you as a leader." The cadets absorbed her words, the earlier bravado tempered by the reality of her experience. The lesson was clear: authority came from more than insignia, it came from the substance behind the uniform. General Matthews' endorsement was more than a formality, it was a reminder that true leadership demanded humility and strength, qualities Harper embodied. The cadets' attitudes began to shift from defiance to understanding, their posture aligning with the unspoken acknowledgement of their own need for growth. Jensen, who had been the most vocal in challenging Harper, now stood quietly, the spark of rebellion dimmed but not extinguished. Her eyes held a new respect, hinting at an internal struggle to reconcile her doubts with the undeniable truth of Harper's leadership. Harper's gaze softened slightly as she addressed the group once more. "I expect discipline, respect, and unity from all of you. This isn't about blind obedience, it's about trust. Trust in your leaders, and trust in each other." The cadets nodded slowly, the weight of responsibility settling upon their shoulders. The atmosphere shifted, the distance between officer and trainee narrowing as mutual respect began to take root. Captain Reynolds stepped back, allowing Harper to command the floor. "Remember," he added, "true authority is earned, not given. Lieutenant Harper has proven that. It's your choice to follow or to falter." The cadets absorbed the message, the transformation in their demeanor unmistakable. The rebellious energy that had once threatened to fracture the formation now dissolved into a collective resolve. As the briefing concluded, Harper's eyes met those of the instructors standing nearby. They exchanged silent acknowledgments. This was a turning point, a moment where leadership transcended rank and became something far more powerful. The training resumed with renewed focus. Orders were executed with precision, the cadets moving as a cohesive unit rather than a collection of individuals. The drills, once marred by resistance and hesitation, now showcased a disciplined determination. In the quiet moments between exercises, Harper walked among the cadets, observing with a keen eye. She saw the subtle changes, the stiffening of posture, the quickened response to commands, the guarded but growing respect in their expressions. Jensen caught her eye briefly, offering a nod of acknowledgement. It was not a gesture of submission, but a tentative step toward understanding. Lieutenant Harper allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. The battle for respect was far from over, but the foundation had been laid. The path ahead would be challenging, but the seeds of true leadership were taking root. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the training grounds, the cadets moved with a newfound purpose. The lessons of discipline, respect, and unity were no longer abstract concepts but lived realities, etched into their every step, every order followed. The legacy of Lieutenant Harper's leadership was beginning to take shape, not through words alone, but through the hard-earned respect that only experience and character could command. Months had passed since the tense morning when Lieutenant Harper had first stepped onto the training grounds, met with open defiance. Now, the atmosphere at Fort Belvoir's academy was transformed, discipline and respect had woven themselves into the very fabric of the cadets' daily routine. The once fractious group moved as a unified force, their boots striking the ground in synchronized rhythm, their expressions marked by focus and determination. Lieutenant Harper stood at the edge of the drill field, observing the cadets as they executed a complex maneuver. The movements were precise, the commands followed with a confidence that spoke of hard-earned trust. Among the trainees was a young cadet named Peterson, her eyes sharp and posture erect as she navigated the challenging formation. "Peterson, hold that line," Harper's voice called out, calm and steady. Peterson responded without hesitation, adjusting her position smoothly, her breathing controlled. The maneuver required split-second decisions and absolute coordination, and she executed it flawlessly. Captain Reynolds, standing nearby, glanced at Harper with a nod of approval. "She's come a long way," he remarked quietly. Harper allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction. "So have they all," she replied. "The change didn't happen overnight, but it's real." As the drill concluded, the cadets fell into formation, awaiting further orders. Harper stepped forward, addressing the group with a tone that was both firm and encouraging. "Discipline isn't about following orders blindly," she said. "It's about understanding why those orders matter, for your safety, your team, and the mission. Today, you've shown that understanding." The cadets responded with respectful silence, the weight of her words settling upon them. Peterson approached Harper after the session, her face bright with accomplishment. "Lieutenant, thank you for your guidance. I never thought I'd get this far." Harper smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "You earned it, Peterson. Keep trusting yourself." Nearby, a plaque bearing Lieutenant Harper's call sign hung prominently in the training hall, a symbol of the cultural shift she had inspired. It was a quiet reminder to all who passed that leadership was not defined by rank alone, but by character, resilience, and the ability to inspire change. Sergeant Barnes, now mentoring a new group of cadets, pointed toward the plaque during instruction. "That's what real leadership looks like," he said. "Learn from it." The story of Lieutenant Harper's rise from a challenged newcomer to a respected leader had become a cornerstone of the Academy's culture. Cadets spoke of her not just as an officer but as a symbol of humility and strength, a mentor who had broken down barriers and reshaped expectations. Captain Reynolds often reflected on the journey. "It wasn't just about discipline," he admitted. "It was about respect, earning it and giving it. Harper showed us all how it's done." As Harper prepared to lead her unit on an upcoming deployment, the lessons she had imparted echoed in her mind. The legacy she left behind was not measured in medals or accolades but in the transformed cadets who now carried forward the values she embodied. Peterson, now a confident officer herself, stood beside Harper as they reviewed mission plans. "You taught me to believe in myself," she said quietly. "That makes all the difference." Harper nodded, her gaze steady. "Leadership isn't about being the loudest or the highest ranking. It's about being the one who stands firm when it matters most." The sun set over Fort Belvoir, casting long shadows that stretched across the training grounds. The plaque bearing Harper's call sign caught the fading light, a beacon of the enduring impact one person's quiet professionalism could have on many. In the cadence of marching boots and the disciplined flow of commands, the spirit of Lieutenant Harper lived on, a testament to the power of humility, respect, and unwavering resolve.